You're listening to the Call Kent podcast, where Kent C. Dodds answers questions and gives insights to software engineers like you. Now, let's hear the call.
Hi Kent, my name is Maciek. I'm curious about your thoughts on balancing conventions in large code bases. For context, I'm working in a project with around 20 developers across 4 separate teams. Where do you think we should draw the line between enforcing conventions for consistency and leaving room for flexibility in individual contributions? Looking forward to hear your thoughts. Thanks.
And that was the call. Here's what Kent had to say.
Hey, Maciek, thank you for the question. So, this is actually pretty pertinent to some of the stuff that I'm working on right now because I want to release the Epic style guide that I am currently in the middle of. It takes a lot of work to write a style guide. It's very boring work, to be honest. But everything like working solo, you don't have to worry so much because like everything is the way that you write it. But if you're working open source or on a large team with a large code base, then the conventions that you follow actually have a lot of value because you have people working in your code and you're working in other people's code on a regular basis, and you want to reduce the amount of ramping up that people have to do as they navigate around the code base. So it's more than just conventions in like code style, which Prettier mostly handles, at least the formatting anyway. It's like also what libraries we're using and stuff like that too. You want to have as much cross-pollination of those kinds of ideas as possible. And so, I guess the first part of this is just to validate your feelings that it is kind of important. Especially here, you're talking about 20 developers across 4 teams. I think like another thing, I guess, to mention too, is that you also have to deal with juniors and people who don't even have an opinion on how to do a certain thing because they just aren't experienced enough. And there are definitely some ways to do things that are better than others. And so, this can be tricky. So where do you draw the line? I think that the way that I feel about it is, as an experienced engineer, maybe it's a little different than the way I felt about it when I was a junior. Pretty much, I think you should only be linting for bugs and should not lint for code style, but you should have a style guide at your company that like you talk about as developers together and things. And the reason that I feel that way is because it's very difficult to effectively lint code style. And also code style isn't, I don't think that it's so important that you need to have the editor yelling at people. That said, I talked about with some juniors who just don't have an opinion about things and they would like to have some guidance. I do think that I am going to, so let me back up. With the style guide that I'm putting together, I will have a linting config, but it will only be linting for bugs like, oh, you did a type of, and the type of that you're trying to check against is invalid. Like you said undefined, but you misspelled undefined or something like that. That's a bug. Or you have a dependency array in your use memo and you're not including one of the dependencies. That's also a bug. And so we're going to do linting rules for those kinds of bugs. But I am also thinking about having linting rule, like a separate config that you can opt into that would include warnings for style as well. Because there are some style things that you can check for fairly reasonably. Lots of linting errors or linting plugins have been created for those things. And so I am considering doing that. The config would just be warnings. There would be no errors at all for those style type things. It'd just be warnings. Because I do think that there are some people who really just want to be told what to do or how to do that. So I guess if I were to give a summary of my answer to your question, where to draw the line, I would draw the line at errors for things that are actual bugs. And sometimes that means that you're writing your own linting rules for the certain scenarios that you've run into at your company. And then possibly warnings for style, but definitely a style guide can be really helpful. And you can just adopt the Epic style guide if you want to. It's going to be called the Epic Programming Style Guide, and it'll be on GitHub, or at least the config and everything will be on GitHub. It's already there actually. It's on github.com/epicweb-dev/config. I might change that to /style guide, but it'll redirect. The style guide itself will be on epicweb.dev, probably /style guide. So anyway, hopefully that is helpful to you. I do think that you're on the right track thinking about having a line between enforced conventions for consistency and then flexibility for individual contributions. I think that you don't want to slow people down just because of some style thing that actually doesn't matter a ton. So thank you for the question. It was a good one and very timely as well. So I'm hoping to launch my style guide in the next week or so. So stay tuned. See ya.
This has been the Call Kent podcast. Learn more about Kent at kentcdodds.com and get your own questions answered at kentcdodds.com/calls.